Now, just to kind of remember what we just went through, we started in verse 7 last week, where he's saying, submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. That's not probably one of the ones you write on a little sticky note to put on your mirror to encourage you in the morning. But then he ends it with this. He says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. So the two bookends there in that part where he's talking about, and when he's talking about repenting and the sinners really kind of get in there, that word that he's using for sinners, that's the same one that they use when it's someone who's, you're blatantly sinning, and you know you're sinning, and you call yourself a Christian, and people tell you probably shouldn't sin. You're like, yeah, I don't care. He's saying to those people, whoa, I know it doesn't matter in the world of whatever you've created. I can create a world of Phil's righteousness, and if Phil thinks it's okay, and then I just kind of keep doing what I want to do. And notice what he starts off with saying. He says, first off, you need to submit yourself. In other words, and Paul uses the language, you need to offer yourself as a sacrifice to God. And he ends it with, humble yourself. See, what it is when we think our way is right, that's when pride comes in, and then we can get ourselves into trouble. And he's like, not to do that. So he's kind of got this humility thing that he keeps kind of tossing in all throughout his letter here. And so from that verse 10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. He jumps in now, and he says, in verse 11, he says, brothers and sisters, I want to jump here. Do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. He goes on to say, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? So he's jumping in and he's getting on this thing of don't be slandering. What's slander? It's bad-mouthing someone, right? And here's the thing. You say this, and almost to a person, anyone you say this to, they would say, yes, I completely agree with that, right? Until someone does some offense, and then all of a sudden you have these feelings that pop up. And as soon as that feeling pops up, you think, well, because I feel this way, that now I should act on this. Right? You ever hear that thing of you got to always be honest with how you feel? Which is awful advice, by the way. I was on a podcast. I was on a podcast because it was my podcast. That's right. I was like, I remember I was chatting with someone. I used to do a marriage podcast with this lady out of Texas, and she had a friend of hers pop on, and she was also very pro-marriage, and I'd come at it from, I was the churchgoer. I used to call her the heathen. She was not so much of a churchgoer, but we both very pro-marriage. So that was the whole purpose of it. Well, she had a friend pop on, and the friend was very strong into the you got to be honest with how you feel. And now my co-host, she just said, uh-oh. I've heard Phil go off on this before. And I said, man, I got to be honest with you. I just don't think that's good advice. And she's like, well, why? I mean, if you feel this way, something's not right. I said, I see what you're saying, but just to use that as that is the universal truth is ridiculous. Think of it like this. You get injured. So once I tore my, actually I've torn both my shoulders now, but when I tore the first one, it obviously it hurt when it happened, but I wake up the next morning and I tore the labrum, the cartilage in there, and I couldn't lift my arm, right? And so the doctor's like, okay, do this test, and you got to see how hard you can lift your arm. And I'm like, he's like, stop. And I do this. It hurts. Okay, then stop. And it was this thing of they're making sure, okay, don't do something that's going to hurt it, right? Well, then I have to go and have surgery. Same thing, don't move it. Make sure it doesn't hurt. And they hop you up on all kinds of pain meds, which, I know some people, I don't think I could ever get addicted to pain meds. I did not like how it made me feel. I was like an emotional mess. I was like, what? I'm crying? I don't know why I'm crying. What's wrong with me? And I'd get off those things. Anyway, but all of a sudden there was a point where I come back, and now my range of motion is probably worse than before I did. And now before when I was doing some, ooh, don't do that, ooh, don't do that. Now I was paying this guy a bunch of money to go see him once a week, and he put me in all kinds of pain. Does it hurt when you do this? Okay, I'm going to take it and yank it a little bit further. Ow! What are you doing? Ow! Now, depending on the situation, at one point when something's not right in there, and the owie pain, you had to assess why the owie, and the doctor said, it's owie because it's torn, so don't move it. After the surgery, I had owie pain. He's like, yeah, but that's a owie we just need to work through. And you push it. So you notice how just even with pain in your own physical things, sometimes it's a bad pain and you need to stop, and sometimes it's a pain you got to push through, right? Like you ever go work out for the first time after not working out in like 15 years, right? And you wake up the next day and like this, I feel awful. Why would I go back to the gym and make myself awful? But how many know? No pain, no gain, right? So now you take that in with your emotions and with your feelings and say, be honest with how you feel. And there might be some times you have that feeling and you go in and you assess. You're like, oh, I'm feeling this way because there is something not right in my life. We need to address that and fix that. And sometimes it's just you're just being a jerk and your selfishness and your evil coming out of you. And that's what's happening, right? And so to just say, you be honest with how you feel. And again, she kind of agreed with me, but didn't want to. She didn't want to give up her little "be honest with how you feel" mantra, and that's fine. I didn't push it too hard. She doesn't attend my church. I was just saying, like this is just kind of what I think and why I think it, and you sort of leave it at that. But when he comes in here and he's talking about you need to not slander one another, you need to not judge, not speak bad about another person. Right after he was talking about this humility thing, is because what happens, and the reason that we badmouth someone, like I said, I can go to almost anyone and read this off, and anyone will say yes. But then you tick them off in some way. You disagree with them in something that they consider is a core value in their life. Like, this is why you can go on the internet. Make any comment about anything. Right? You can go on there and say, I love pineapple on pizza. You will have the nastiest, most vile comments coming through here, insulting you, slandering you, just you don't know pizza, you don't know. Now listen, I agree with those people because I don't think pineapple should be on pizza. It's okay. That's not the point. That's why I'm saying all this. I'm just trying to convert more people to the non-pineapple side. It's good in a drink. I don't like it on my pizza. Okay. But what happens is, if in my world, yeah, pineapple shouldn't be on pizza, and you step past that, well, sure, I'm not supposed to slander anyone, but look what you just did. Now I have to, because I have to be honest with how I feel. You see how quickly we start justifying all kinds of bad things? And James is seeing this. I mean, this is 2,000 years ago. They're having the same problems in there. Man, you guys are yelling at each other. You're bad-mouthing someone. You're talking behind their back. You're tearing down their reputation. That's what slander is. And again, we agreed, yeah, you shouldn't do that. Oh, sure. In a vacuum, everyone thinks that until that person, someone does something, ooh, and you get on them. And you would think, yeah, but that doesn't happen inside the church. Oh, good Lord. It is as if we have perfected this. Have any of you ever ran into someone, or maybe you were this person for a long time, where they wanted nothing to do with church? Why? Because they're a bunch of hypocrites. You ever hear that? Why? Because we're standing up there and yelling at people, and we're sitting there saying, we are one in the spirit. Everybody, we love everybody. Look at you. You look different, and you act different. You're not doing things the right way. What's going on? And you'll hear about someone. You don't go to them and confront something. You just start giving, all these reasons. Well, I think that so-and-so does that. Well, it's probably because they're probably a drunk. Or that he's probably cheating on his wife. I bet you I tell you what. That's judging. See, judging is when someone does something and you give the reason why. You don't know why, but you'll give the reason why. You ever do that? God forgive me. I do that. And he's saying we need to not stop doing that. You're tearing the person down. And what Jesus is all about is building us up. And so what you need to do is you need to humble yourself to that. So when those feelings pop up, when those things pop up, this whole idea of offering yourself as a living sacrifice and humbling yourself is so that when, Phil pops up and Phil thinks, I think this, I don't just think, I think it, therefore it's genius. I'll get me in all kinds of trouble. What I should do is take that feeling and go, whoa, okay, and now I balance that and I look at what God says. How does this, right? I humble myself. Well, God, what do you say about this? Man, I want to chew this person out. Oh, and it happens to me so often. There's times I've had to call my buddy Matt and go off, and he's like, well, how about this? How about you don't send the response now? Sleep on it and wait till tomorrow. And so far it's, batting 1,000, and I always feel differently the next day. But in the moment, it feels so good. It's like a just scratch that that itch, you can scratch it and you got to not do it, because they're so wrong and they're wrong. And you could tell them 8 million ways they're wrong. Get in there, right? You've got these things pop up. So when you see someone, and as church folks, man, all of a sudden you see some church person and they're struggling or they're doing something. Oh, did you hear what so-and-so did? Did you hear what their kids did? I tell you what, I don't know what's going on in that household, but something's not good. I would never put up with that. I tell you that. Right? Stop. That's not from God. But what does it do? It kind of makes us feel better. Some of the people in the church that I've seen over the years that I've actually seen this play out, or a brother or sister has a moral failure, and there'll be a group of people who, want to torch him. And they're mean and they're nasty, and then all of a sudden, a year later, it comes out that person was in something way worse than what the other person was. And it's like, I bet you they're trying to deflect, they're trying to make themselves feel better. I don't know. It wasn't because of righteousness, to tell you that. You could tell it at the time. It was kind of odd. Like, why is this person so mad? So upset? Because they were struggling with something similar. Because in our minds, if I can tear someone else down, then maybe I'm a little bit better. And he says, don't be doing that. He said, plus you judge, you're speaking against the law and judge that. You didn't write the law. I didn't write the law. You didn't write the law. He says there's one lawgiver and one judge. There's one who is able to save and one who is able to destroy. There's truly one judge. And it's not us. He's like, so don't do it. He's got the job. He's good. That's not what he needs your help with. Now, it doesn't mean that if someone's in sin, well, we can't say anything to them. Well, first off, if they don't consider themselves a Christian, you should almost expect that they'd be sinning, right? So outside the world, no. That's why Jesus would go and hang out with sinners. Remember that? But yet, if you call yourself a follower of Christ and you're blatantly living in sin, well, yeah, you can say something there. But Paul addresses this several times. I want to take a look at this. First, I want to take a look at Galatians, where he says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, and he's talking about in the church, you who live by the Spirit should what? Should restore that person. Is it you should point out what a loser they are? That's your mission? To just bring down fire and brimstone so they just realize what they are and then you walk away as they're just a smoldering mess? No, what's the goal? To restore. And how are we supposed to do it? He says that we're supposed to restore that person gently. See, the focus that Paul is saying there is, yeah, you'll see people that are caught in sin. You might see someone who's maybe a mess. Go talk to the person. See if you can't restore them. And it certainly doesn't help to restore them by going around and telling everyone, did you see what so-and-so did? Did you see what so-and-so did? That doesn't help them. He also says in 1 Corinthians 5, this is a situation where, and the church in Corinth, it was something. You know, on one hand, it was seeing some God moving in amazing ways. I mean, ways that would just like make us go, holy cow. And at the same time, they had some just nasty stuff going on inside their church. So there's one individual, it says he's sleeping with his mom. People hope that it was a stepmom. It doesn't specifically say. But either way, it was like Paul hears about this. He's like, what? Yeah, brother so-and-so. You know, and they're just kind of letting it happen. You know, it'd be like me coming up, you know, someone telling you, hey, you know, Pastor Phil, you know, what he does to help raise money for the church is he kind of got a Breaking Bad situation. He's out there in the parking lot, you know, making crystal meth and selling it to people in the neighborhood. Won't anyone say anything? Well, you know, I mean, you've got to have grace for him and just people. No. You know, so that's you can kind of tell things are a little different in here. So he says, well, what about that situation? He says, well, but now I'm writing you in 1 Corinthians 5, is Paul saying this. Specifically, he was just talking about this, a bunch of nasty stuff, including this guy. Anyway, it says, but now I'm writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister, but is sexually immoral, greedy, an idolater, a slanderer, a drunkard, or a swindler. Do not even eat with such people. Right? And it's like, well, that's different. Why is he saying that? You say, because, listen, there's some people who are stuck in, I haven't seen it a lot. I mean, I've been working in the church for 25-something plus years, I guess. And I've only seen this, 2 or 3 times, where someone is in a blatant sin and just coming in and they want to volunteer and they're worshiping God and they know better. It's not like they're a new Christian, right? And you go and you talk to them, say, dude, what are you doing? Like, you're cheating on your wife or you stole a bunch of money out of it. Like, what's going on? And you're not, no, it's fine. Yeah, I know, but I don't care. God loves me anyway. And they just keep going on the thing. And you try and tell them again, like, hey, listen, right? You try the restore gently kind of thing. You bring a couple more people and say, hey, such and such. Nope. And there's only been a couple of times that we've had to say, like, listen, then you can't be doing this. You can't be doing that. We didn't kick them out completely, but it's like we can't out there teaching kids and this and that. Like, you clearly are sinning, telling us you don't care. And Paul says, well, no, if they're blatantly sinning, especially if they're doing some, you know, my hope would be if you find out that I am, in fact, you know, making crystal meth in the parking lot, you contact, you know, my dad, you contact Bishop Sean, they're the ones over me, and our leadership folks here would do that. They would say, guess what? You need to not be doing that anymore, and they will remove me. So I hope that's what you would do and not just be like, well, you know, I mean, it's a good fundraiser for the church, I guess. You know, no. That's not that, okay? So, yes, we still need to have, like, places in our life that we go, okay, you can't do that. But it's all about, though, what is truly the best for us to protect people and the best for that person. Paul goes on, he explains this in another spot in 2 Thessalonians. He says, take special note of anyone who does not obey our instruction in this letter. Do not associate with them in order that they may feel ashamed. Do not regard them as an enemy, but warn them as a brother. So it used to be where, you know, it was the act of shunning. You ever heard of that? You know, someone they won't listen, do this. That they would kind of be like, okay, then you got to go on the outside. It doesn't really work very well these days. If I kicked you out of this church, you'd be in another church for the end of the week, right? So that kind of doesn't necessarily work so great from the church standpoint. It would probably work better for people closer to them, you know. But you notice the reason why is because we want to restore this person, but they're not listening. They're stuck. So we're going to separate ourselves and hope that God convicts them, right? We don't separate them as though they're an enemy, kick them out, now you're in a battle with them. No, it's like as a brother. Man, I love you, but I can't be around you if you're acting like this. You know, so something to get a hold of them to snap through that. And again, the whole idea with all of this, when you see someone in sin, when you see someone messing up, he points out again and again, you're thinking not just to tear that person down for no reason. You're not judging. You're not sending them to hell. You're trying to do the best for them. Because, see, that's what God always wants. Right? When you were a sinner, what had he already done for you? He sent his son Jesus to die on the cross so that you can be forgiven, so that you can be made righteous and holy before you ever asked for it. That's his heart. That's the heart he wants us to have. He's like, hey, you're now an adopted child inside this new family. This is how we do it. This is how we love other people. We want to help find a way to build other people and to grow other people. And so when you get those feelings that you just want to knock someone down and punch them out and humble yourself when you feel that and think, you know what, this is me. I can tell this is me. But God, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond in this? And sometimes you're stuck in real tricky situations, and you can chat with someone else, come and talk to me, Pastor, I'm in this weird thing. And and sometimes there are people in real difficult situations. What do I do in this? How do I deal with this? It can help walk you through looking at the scripture and what it says and how to deal with these things. But the hope is, and the idea that really James is trying to get through is just humble yourself. He goes on with this humility idea in his next spot here, closing out this chapter. He says, now listen, in verse 13, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this or to that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. What is he saying here? He's saying he doesn't like you guys who plan stuff. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke. The Bible says in more than one spot that it is good to plan. It is good to set things out. I mean, I think of, we just did this remodel in the kids area, right? Now, I might have had the idea of, hey, let's do something. But it was the person who knew how to plan and execute that plan. That's who's really going to make it happen. God bless Michaela, because she did that. So planning is good. So, well, then what is he talking about here? He's talking about, are you humbling yourself at all when you make these plans? There's times it's some people, successful people, get pretty good at doing stuff. And they sort of know, if I do this, if I do that, it will succeed. And they can start to get a little bit of a air about them. I've had the privilege of being around several different very successful people, entrepreneurs who did things and stuff, and it's kind of all over the place. I've met the ones who, through all of it, stay extremely humble, who are always listening to advice, even though it's like I'm sitting there staring at them and they're listening to something I'm saying, and I'm like, I'm a moron compared to you. What do you, listen, And I've been around the folks before, too, who it's like they rule their kingdom. And they have all the genius things. Why would anyone even offer a suggestion in my world? I didn't care for those people as much. All still successful. But the difference in that was the humility thing. And see, James goes as far as to even call it's kind of evil. You're not, God isn't in what your plans are at all. So you're making these plans, you're doing all these things. You don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. You have any humility? I mean, you see Paul do this. Paul writes letters. In Romans, we read, when he wrote the letter to Romans, he's like, listen, I want to come see you guys. I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to go here, there, and this and that. And I hope to come and see you if it's the Lord's will, right? He would always kind of hit that part in there. But he was still making plans and going after him. So it's good to make plans. But he's like, bring God into your plans. Man, you don't want to get arrogant. Man, pride comes before the fall. There's a lot of ministry people I've seen who have, pastors will go in and they'll start a ministry or they'll start a church or something, and all of a sudden it takes off. It goes real fast, real quick. And you sort of see them. They all of a sudden start to think, maybe it's because I'm so wonderful. Maybe because I'm so amazing. And I'm the best at this and I'm the best at that. And I've seen them fall, man. I've heard stories from those pastors. I said, man, I thought anything I did was going to work. And he's like, so then I stopped listening to people. Next thing you know, I'm getting in, I'm doing things immoral that I know I shouldn't do. But I had myself convinced, but as long as I'm doing it, it's fine. How did they get there? And they weren't someone like that beforehand. It's like I stopped having humility. I stopped coming in and saying, God, like, if you will it. Because you start to see success, and then you start to, it'd be like, you ever help a little kid do something, like they're going to try and lift something that's really heavy. Yeah, lift, buddy, lift. And then you're helping underneath, lift it up. Oh, look, you did it. Now imagine them going around like, oh, I'm so awesome. I can lift anything and da-da-da. You'd be like, dude, come on, I was helping you. We do that with God. Blessing is in our life. Things are happening. If we don't have any humility, we think it's we're just so wonderful. Listen, I think you're wonderful. God thinks you're wonderful. But he's saying, but don't get so arrogant that you're just saying, well, I'm going to do this and that and that. And it's all me, 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 me. It's like you can write worship songs and just insert your name in there. Oh, Phil, you are so amazing. Just got to, we sometimes we get like that. And you say, well, we can't be confident. No, confidence is all great. But when it's a thing of where you're not humbling yourself in God, man. And when things are going well, you should always be doing that. I had pastor when I first came down here and tell me, say, hey, listen, man, if all of a sudden something takes off, starts going well, do not start thinking it's just because you're so wonderful. Do not stop letting people speak into your life. Do not start walking around like you get this arrogance. So it will destroy you like that. And I said, well, the good thing is I don't think I'm that talented to have that happen, so I should be okay. I'm like on the opposite end, So, yeah, when God does something, I was like, that's clearly God, man. If you knew me, you know that's God. But it's this thing that we all need to have this in our lives. And then look how he ends this. He says, if anyone then knows of the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. We call this the sin of omission. There's times we can sin against God by what we do. And there's times we can sin against God by what we left undone and we have not done. If you see someone hurting and you know they need help and you don't do it. If you knew that you were supposed to be kind to that person and God doesn't want you to yell at them, but you yell at them anyway. Yeah, that's all sin. We're not going to get this right all the time, okay? If we could, we wouldn't need the grace of God. And earlier in this chapter, you remember when James himself, he's kind of hammering into us here, he said, you know what? God has more grace. More grace than what? More grace than you got sin. More grace than you got to mess up. But it doesn't mean that we just sit in that grace and keep living like little sinners. We'll be ineffective. We're not a part of the mission of helping, God, love people around the earth and sharing the message and helping to make things better. So we need to be a part of that. And that's James' kind of his big thing here. And you kind of see it in here. If you know the good you ought to do, then you don't do it. That's a sin for you. He's a big believer in really hammering point this idea of your faith demands action. Being a Christian is not just a passive faith. It's not just to come in, sit and listen to, the worship band and Phil, and you head out on your day. It's not just to kind of boost you up and help get you through the week. The hope is that eventually you get on mission and you realize that we're on a mission here. And you start thinking of ways you can put your faith into action. And I'm telling you, when you do that, and you learn to humble yourself, you learn to submit yourself to God, I'm telling you, watch how God will do things in your life. I got a pastor friend this week. I saw a quote from him. I didn't hear it completely in the context, but I think I know him well enough and what was being said there to use this little quote here. But it was a great quote. He said, some of you, the reason you don't have the resurrection power of Christ in your life is because y'all won't die. You haven't died yet. You're still hanging on to parts of yourself. You're still hanging on to the selfishness in you. You got these feelings and you won't let go, and you won't let go. It's scary. But Jesus says, if whoever loses his life will find it. And at some point you have to trust in that. James before, he said, submit yourself to God. Paul says, offer yourselves a living sacrifice. Jesus tells us to pick up our cross daily and follow him. There's this thing that every day we need to start dying to ourselves. And if you will do that, and you will start jumping on mission, you start following after God, start living how he wants you to live, and get active with your faith, I'm telling you, some of you out there's miracles in your lives. God is just waiting for you need to go. What we want is we want him to do the miracle first, and then I'll go. But he's got this way of saying, you gotta kind of trust me. Look at even how Jesus does miracles, how many times he does things. He does weird things at times, like spits in mud and wipes it on people's eyes. And says, now go wash it off. And you got to imagine this guy must have had faith through all of this, because I don't think it was a common practice back then for random people to come and spit in mud and wipe it on your eyes. But he's just kind of like, I don't know. I guess this is what he does. He's a mud spitter guy. I don't know what's going on. Maybe he's blind and can't tell what's going on. But still, you probably pick it up altogether. But then he goes, sure enough, washes his eyes, and he can see. But he had to have faith, didn't he? It would have been a lot easier to see and then say, now go wash your face. Okay. So I think you should, some of you need to pray about that, or listen to the Holy Spirit. God, what do you want me to do? What are areas in my life that I can start being more active in my faith? God, help me to do this, because it's tough. And you think, well, I try, but I keep messing up, and I'll do this or that. Welcome to the club. I don't know how many of you in here think that everyone was pure just from last Sunday to this Sunday. I'm sure we all did something, said something, left something undone that we haven't done, right? But that's a part of walking the Christian faith. But as long as we're moving forward, as we're following God, when we fall down, we get back up and we lean into that grace, and he washes me clean, and now I move forward. Help me to do good. Help me to do good, God. That's a person that has a heart for God. Is your desire to do that? And so you'll find those areas in your life where you can tell, like, okay, God's telling me to do this, and all of a sudden you're stuck with this thing of like, ooh, I don't want to do that. And that's where the encouragement here is. Let it go, man. Trust in him. Submit yourself. And let God be God in all of your life. Amen.